do not believe in it. And they believe instead a different position which claims that learned competence and acquired competence are not two separate knowledge systems, but instead they are the endpoints along a continuum. Like this. LC and AC, acquired and learned competence. They are the endpoints along a continuum. So first you learn a rule. They also believe that input fosters acquisition. They don't deny it. But what they also offer is that there is an alternative path. There is an alternative way. You first learn a rule consciously. It becomes a part of your learned competence. And through conscious practice, it becomes acquired or automatic or subconscious. They believe so. So the interface position, the majority position is appealing to our intuitions. We believe that the interface position is intuitively appealing, but Krashen's position, non-interface position, is somewhat runs contrary to our intuitions. And intuitions, in fact, in scientific philosophizing, reasoning, intuitions are of undeniable importance. They are an important source of knowledge. We do not ignore them. But as long as they are not contrary to empiric data, it is at this point that empiric data and our intuitions, interface intuitions, are in conflict. It has been reportedly found that, researchers found that second language learners, irrespective of the learning environment, whether they pick it up on the streets or in a classroom setting environment, they pick up the grammar rules of a second language in a predictable, unchangeable, natural order. Let me show you the natural order. Only one part of the natural order. We don't know the whole order, but we do know that there is an order. And this is one part of the whole grammar, of course. We did it, that is, researchers did not investigate all the grammatical rules. They just picked up 10 or 20 items, grammar rules, and found that these structures are picked up or acquired in their order. They first pick up the first box rules, and then the second, and then third, and then the last one. And if you pay attention to the order, the acquisition order, I underline the term acquisition, when you analyze it, you will see that this order will not match our teaching order. Why? For example, look at the last box, third person singular S. It is the S in the present simple for the third person singular pronouns. In the sentence, for example, he goes to school. We teach it very early in our teaching program, in the very first month maybe. But our students seem to resist accepting that grammar rule. Even I haven't acquired it yet, as far as I understand. So I make a lot of mistakes. So, I know that the rule is quite simple, but unfortunately I can't use it. I made a lot of mistakes. Why? Because acquisition order is different. No matter when you learn a rule, there's a device which picks up the grammar rules in a natural order. I will talk about that device later on. But see that teaching order or learning order, you can learn in any order. But when it comes to acquisition, you can't. It is that is, our students have such a brain, let's say, or such a device in their brain that does not listen to what you are teaching consciously. And this is not just speculation, this is empiric data. And for example, this is Rodellis, maybe you know it. He's a very famous methodologist. In his book, Instructed Second Language Learning, he writes, instruction, grammar instruction, does not appear to influence the order of acquisition or development. He says development. No matter what order grammatical structures are presented and practiced in the classroom, learners will follow their natural order, their built-in syllabus. So it doesn't matter how you order it, they acquire the natural terms in line with natural order. And Larson, Freeman, and Long, 1991, this is not 1891. Review or research on the effect of instruction on second language development suggests that formal second language instruction does not seem able to alter acquisition order or sequences. So, in fact, this is quite frustrating for our teachers because what they teach is not internalized by their students. In fact, the gap between what students consciously know and what they can supply while speaking fluently, there's a gap, because you may know it, but you cannot use it while speaking fluently, because while speaking fluently, the only grammar that you can use comes from acquired competence. You cannot deal with form, grammar, while speaking fluently. And while finding out these grammar items, this order, they tested the learner's fluent conversation, not grammar exam. They didn't give them grammar exam. If they had given, then they would, of course, supply S, third person singular S, correctly. In a grammar exam, you can use your learned competence, but while speaking fluently, this is the criteria. If you are able to use it, then it shows that you have acquired it. So, investigators investigated the fluent conversation, not grammar performance. So the gap between what our students consciously know and what they can use during fluent conversation subconsciously, the gap between the two, has led many researchers to investigate the alterability of natural order or the interferability of acquisition process. And Heinemann, in 1989, Heinemann and Ellis made two separate but very similar researches on German language acquisition. Heinemann and Ellis research. Okay, this is our German grammar order, acquisition order from ABC. I simplified the study as much as possible. While teaching these three rules, they reverted the order. They reversed the order and taught C the first and A the last. And in terms of degree of emphasis, they taught C the most. That is, they emphasized C the most and A the least, so that they tested if they can somehow change the order. But again, the classroom learners, their students, pick the grammar rules in accordance with natural order. The results of this study, this is Ellis 1989, the results of this study support the claim that classroom and naturalistic street learners, L2 learners, second language learners, follow similar routes. So no matter where you learn or acquire a language, whether in the classroom or in this natural setting, you would have to obey some certain orders, which are determined by some psycholinguistic factors. You cannot distort the order. And Heinemann in 1989, there are two general findings which are important in the present context. Formal classroom, that is, learners develop their language stepwise and in line with natural order, despite the scheduling, that is, reversing of the teaching. And more importantly, in the same order as has been found for the naturalistic acquisition of German. These and similar many other similar research results. I don't want to go into the details of it, otherwise I will not have enough time to discuss many other things. These and many other similar researchers have supported Krashen's counterintuitive position, non-interface position. That is, Krashen says if learning became acquisition, if conscious knowledge can be converted to subconscious knowledge through practice, then it would be possible, it must have been possible to revert the order, to change the order. If we cannot change the order, then he says, quite rightly, acquisition and learning are two distinct processes, and that learning does not become acquisition. They require different processes in the mind. So what's going on? Okay. If we cannot acquire through grammar learning, then how does acquisition take place? This is a question that needs to be answered. And Krashen's input hypothesis gives the answer. According to this hypothesis, we acquire a new language. It might be a mother tongue or it might be a second language, doesn't matter. We acquire any new language in an amazingly simple way. Not through grammar learning, not through speaking practice, not through writing practice, not writing horse, of course, but through getting comprehensible input or getting listening to understandable messages. A cornerstone of Krashen's theory is the idea that, this is very basic in his theory, that human beings are equipped with a language acquisition device, a language-specific acquisition device, which Krashen calls LAD, language acquisition acronym. And he believes that this acquisition device is triggered by comprehensible inputs. That is, when we understand a message, he says, Krashen says, that is, when we understand a message, as long as we understand it, LAD somehow picks up the grammar rules in that message subconsciously and automatically. You can't help it, you can't avoid it, he says. It is inevitable. Every kind of input, every kind of utterance in a sentence, let's say, have both meaning and form. It has two basic components, semantic and grammatical. Let's say form represents grammar and meaning is the semantic aspect. Okay, while listening to an input, while understanding an input, you pay attention to its meaning. For example, while you are listening to me, are you analyzing my grammar? Yes, mostly you focus on the meaning of my utterances, so conscious focus is on meaning. And at the same time, the subconscious mechanism focuses on the form. These two types of focus must co-occur. The reason why you cannot acquire in a grammar situation, grammar learning situation, is that you have to focus two things at a time, both form and grammar, meaning. This is impossible because human beings are limited capacity processors. They cannot focus two things at a time. For example, if you're not a proficient driver, then you cannot talk while driving. Why? Because you're consciously focusing on driving. If you focus consciously on another thing, then you may cause an accident. But when driving is handled by a subconscious automatic mechanism, then you can talk. Because conscious focus can occur at one thing at a time. But there may be millions of subconscious focus. We breathe, we walk, we do lots of things subconsciously, but only one thing consciously. So, in order for acquisition to take place, these two types of focus, conscious and subconscious focus must occur at the same time. I don't want to go into the details of psycholinguistic aspects of acquisition, but let me keep it brief. How many minutes do we have? So I have millions of things to explain. Okay, how does acquisition take? When language acquisition device picks up the grammar rules in accordance with natural order, of course. Let's say that you are, in terms of your current acquired competence level, you are at the level of X, let's say, okay? In order for you to move from X to X plus 1, you need to get an input which has in it, which bears X plus 1 rule, a rule which represents X plus 1. Okay, let's say that our input had 4 types of grammar rules representing 4 different levels. X, X plus 1, X minus 1, X plus 2. When you hear that input, you probably strengthen X and X minus 1 because you have already picked them up. You strengthen them. You can pick up X plus 1, but unfortunately not X plus 2, because technically speaking, you are psycholinguistically not ready to pick it up or to acquire it. You may understand the whole message, you may understand the sentence, he goes to school, but that S is X plus 100. So, it doesn't matter whether you understand the message or not. You have to be at the level of X plus 99 to pick up third person singular S. Okay, this is how you go along the natural order. What next? A common misconception. I have a handout outline. A common misconception among applied linguists, methodologists, is that they equate inductive learning with acquisition. They say, if we do not tell the grammar rules directly to the students, if we hide them somehow, if we do not talk about the target structure of the day, if we make our students discover the structures on their own, then they will be able to acquire it. But in fact, and let me show one such typical example. You know Jeremy Harmon, eh? He's a very famous methodologist. Confusing inductive learning with acquisition, a typical example. Covered, there's inductive, implicit, indirect grammar teaching, is where grammatical facts are hidden from the students, where new grammar is practiced or introduced, but their attention will be drawn to the activity or to the text. Nothing is wrong with it, but not to the grammar. Until now, nothing is wrong. But with covered grammar, teachers help their students acquire and practice the language. But, as I have stated before, if the learner is not psycholinguistically ready to pick up a rule, no matter how you teach it, you may either use inductive learning, deductive learning, grammar translation, whatever, communicative techniques, doesn't matter, they cannot pick it up because their psycholinguistic is not ready. So, this is a very common misconception. In fact, the distinctive feature of 20th century ELT methodology. After grammar translation, every method appeared that inductive teaching is the best method of teaching everything, but I'll show that it is not. Okay, I'll try to show. Well, not me, the researchers is. Okay, but isn't there any good of teaching grammar? No, it didn't mean that. If you ask this question, isn't there any good of teaching grammar, he would say minimum, if any. Because according to Krashen, the basic role, the most important function of grammar teaching or grammar knowledge is to make corrections while speaking. He says, learned competence act as a monitor or editor while speaking or writing. The initiator of our utterances is acquired competence, okay, while speaking fluently, especially. But sometimes we have tried to focus on the form, especially while writing. You first initiate a sentence in your mind, and you scan that sentence, and perceive that there is something missing, third person singular S. And this S is attached to the end of the verb by learned competence or by monitor, he says, Krashen says. Either before or after production, you restate after production, or if it is before, it is better because your teacher will not punish you. So this is the main function of learned competence according to Krashen. But, so he underestimates grammar teaching. Krashen might be justified in his underestimation because he's trying to teach English in the States. I can teach any language in this natural environment. The problem here in Turkey is that English, the States for English is an input-rich country. Outside of France, there are lots of input. You can get millions of input outside. But in Turkey, there is scarcity of input in terms of English. So, grammar plays a far more important role than just correction during production. It facilitates comprehension. If you know some grammar, if you have some grammar knowledge in your learned competence, then the amount of text that you can decode is greatly increased, especially in reading. Let me give an example. In first case, you have no learned competence, no grammar, conscious grammar knowledge, and you have 1 kilogram of acquired competence, for example. The amount of input you can get is, let's say, 2 kilograms, okay, with 1 kilogram of acquired competence. But if you have an additional 1 kilogram of grammar, conscious knowledge of grammar, then the amount of input you can get is doubled or tripled, 5 or 6 kilograms. What does this mean? If you get more input, then you acquire faster. So, the grammar still cannot, learning still cannot become acquisition. We believe in it. But, I believe in it, but some of the people. Learning, because this is the minority view, I know that there are lots of people who are negating this, despite minority view. And learning still cannot become acquisition, but learning aids acquisition by varying comprehension, by facilitating comprehension, and by increasing the number of input avenues. So, the more you learn grammar, the more input you get, the faster, the better you understand, and the faster you acquire. So this is a point that Krashen uses as well, because he does not talk about that function of grammar in his theory. And in the whole Krashenian literature, I could only find out one single paragraph talking about this, the facilitated effect of grammar in comprehension. So, in an EFL setting, it is very important, especially at the very beginning level. Okay. Once you accept the claim that learning does not become acquisition, then you have to be tolerant of errors. If you accept the idea that learning doesn't become acquisition, then you have to be tolerant for errors, and this is normal, so I can skip it. You should have you should not correct every form-based error. The only error that can be corrected in natural approach is meaning errors. For example, if a person says, if the grammatical mistake is so awful that you cannot get across the meaning, you cannot understand the meaning of the utterance, then you can ask, what do you mean to your students? Or can you restate this? This is meaning correction, and this is not offensive. And the good thing is that, for meaning correction only, when you correct meaning errors, they are not offended. But if you correct every third person singular utterance, then the class will be a kind of error correction activity, full of error correction activity, and they will be offended. What happens when they are offended, when they are injured psychologically? Krashen believes that there is an affective filter which blocks input reaching lag. He hypothesizes that there is a filter between input and language acquisition device. Input has to go through the affective filter to reach lag. Okay, if you correct every error, then this filter gets strengthened and does not allow the input to reach lag. So acquisition literally does not take place. Even if the input is comprehensible, it does not take place. So you should avoid a form-based error correction. If the error, the form error, does not cause a problem, then no problem. So teachers who are correcting mistakes is not only wasting their time, because they will not be able to correct it anyway, because research has been shown us that error correction does not necessarily lead to the correction of errors. So they are not just wasting their time, but also doing disservice to their students. So far, I've tried to explain the theoretical basis of natural approach, and now I'll try to explain how we apply natural approach in Turkish Military High School at the prep class. The most important implication of acquisition learning distinction hypothesis, the first and the most important hypothesis, is that form-based and meaning-based activities should be separated. Why? Because, as I've said, human beings are limited capacity processors. When they are focusing on form, they cannot easily focus on the meaning as well. And when they are focusing on the meaning, they cannot focus on form. So, we separated our English program in Kuleli into two unequal parts: input hours and grammar hours. And input hours occupied some 75 or 80% of the whole program, and grammar hours occupied only 20 or 25% of the whole program. So this is just the reverse of the previous year. In the previous year, just the reverse was true. And accordingly, we changed our testing system also, because if what you're doing in class does not match what you test in an exam, then there will be a negative backwash. If you all the time focus on input, but if you ask lots of grammar questions in the test, then they will focus on grammar after the test. So this is negative backwash. So in order to avoid that negative effect, we also made a separation and kept the ratio constant in the tests as well. What kind of meaning-based activities do we do? We are still doing it because we are applying it this year. Do we do, or not me, but some of the teachers here, Necati and Shula, I think. And they're still doing it. What are you doing? They're primarily focusing on listening. Why listening? Because while listening, students get comprehensible input. It's a receptive skill where you can get input. Why not reading? Because you can do reading outside the class, but not listening easily, because only using one tape you can make lots of people. For example, you can listen to me, okay? I'm just speaking, you're all listening. But outside of class, I have to talk to every one of you, So listening is quite hard outside the class. You can use only one tape inside the class, but outside the class you have to use hundreds of tapes in libraries. So listening is easier inside the class. And reading is done not intensively, but extensively. Why? Because intensive reading, while reading intensively, for example, in 1 hour, you can read 1 page, for example, let's say. In 1 hour, you can read only 1 page of intensively. But extensively, you can read 10 pages within the same time limit. So on the one hand, you have only 1 page of input. On the other, you have 10 pages of input. Which one is better? According to the theory, the 10 pages are better. So we do extensive reading, and accordingly we assign extensive reading homework. Our students read simplified novels and stories. And let me give you the average number of books that each student has read up to now. It is around, what is it? 70.
Or 80.
Simplified, 70. It is more than 60 at least, let's say, which means that 3,000 pages of written input. Okay? And we have about, during the whole year, we have about 500 hours of listening input and 3,000 pages of written input. So this triggers LAD, initiate LAD a lot. So you progress very rapidly. This is simple, easily applicable, but easy applicability does not necessarily mean that it is not ineffective. We tested the efficacy of natural approach in Kuleli, and accordingly we gave a standard test, KET, maybe you have heard it, Key to English test, comprising listening, reading, writing components, and plus a separate standard grammar test. And we gave the same test to another military high school using the same textbook, but with a grammar-oriented method, with a different method. And the results show that, let's see the results. Let me cover one part of it, so that it will be more exciting. Okay, this is the difference in success. Difference in success. Kuleli performed better in all skills tested. Listening, 40% better. This is different. In reading, 25%. These might be considered natural outcome, natural product of our heavy focus on reading and listening. Throughout the whole year, they make listening and reading activities, so this is quite natural, as you may say. But a more interesting result is this. We deliberately avoided writing activities, especially in one class. In fact, this is a master thesis research. Lieutenant Ali Işık and Şahin Çetin are doing this research in one class. And they deliberately avoided writing activities because the topic of the thesis research is the effect of receptive skills on productive skills. So they didn't teach anything productive in terms of writing. And you know, grammar is very minimum. But again, there is 30% difference in success in favor of Kuleli students and 18% in grammar. If there were no difference in success, still our students will be better because overall, in terms of overall language proficiency, they are better at least in terms of reading and listening. But again, we see that in writing, in a productive skill also, and also in grammar, they are better. So, let me finish it. There's the last page. Okay. Okay. Natural approach, in short, with its somewhat modified version, seems to be an appropriate method applicable in an EFL setting like Turkey. It is a reality that the number of native and true bilingual teachers in our country is low. The number of such teachers is low. But under even such limited circumstances, the successful application of natural approach at prep class in Kuleli has shown that students attain high levels of proficiency when exposed to ample amounts of input. To sum up, NA, natural approach, seems to be a method of fostering both productive and receptive